Let me call this meeting of the Monroe County Redevelopment Commission to order on March 26, 2025. Jeff?
Commissioner Martin.
Yes.
Commissioner Cassidy.
Present.
Commissioner McCarty.
Yes.
Commissioner Tucker.
Present.
We have 3 voting members and 1 non-voting member present, so we have a quorum.
All right. How do you want to proceed with these reports? Do you want to present them?
I think we will let
Present?
the Financial Solutions Group present them. I would ask TSC if you could, I'm trying to log into this, so if you could log me into the meeting and then give me the ability to share. That way I can try to keep up with him as he moves along so that people at home can follow. You promote Charlie as well.
You've been made a presenter.
Good afternoon. This is Charlie. Can you guys hear me?
Just fine.
All right. Can I share my screen? Is that possible? Or Jeff, will you do that?
If they can give you the ability, I seem to be having trouble getting in.
All right. How about that? Can you see my screen? It should show the Curry Profile TIF District Report.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'll start with that one if that's okay. And we'll just go through these alphabetically, and I'll kind of hit the highlights. And if anybody has a question or wants to go into more detail, we can do that.
Okay.
So Curry Profile, we did on the old GE property is basically what that area entails. And if we go to page 3, we've got a little bit of a summary here. We authorized $6,175,000 of TIF bonds to help finance the project there. This unfortunately kind of got caught up in the time of COVID, and there were some other delays there. And really, there hasn't been a lot of new development there. And the developer has only drawn $103,200 on that TIF bond. So we authorized over $6 million. They didn't draw that. We've started to pay that back because there has been some TIF revenue there. And we have about $52,000 left to pay on the bonds. So if we, I'll go to that. Here's our debt service schedule. It's 2.5%. The bonds were issued in 2018. 52,000 is what's remaining. We pay that down as much as we can with the TIF revenue that does come in. And we do pay interest on those bonds. And I'll skip to this page. This is our cash flow. All the TIF revenue goes into the county fund 4934. So we've gotten about $25,000 in 23 and 24 for TIF revenue. And then the claims there, the majority of that is for debt service on the bonds. So we've got a $5,000 balance. We've kind of said that's our minimum that we want to keep in there, just in case we have some expenses we don't expect. And then I'll go down. You can see the assessed value In 22, it was $1,480,000 that we captured, just about the same in 23 and 24. And we've had a little bit of growth in 25, so almost $3 million of assessed value captured for 25. That's going to bring in, based on the 25 tax rate, about $46,000. So probably not enough to pay the bonds off totally, but we're going to be real close to getting those paid off, if not in 25, then in 26. So that's kind of the highlights on Curry profile. Are there any questions on that report?
Yes. Once we pay off this bond, there is nothing else planned in terms of improvements. So any collections we would get would then become excess, probably, because there's no plan for them. So does it make sense to pay off this bond or keep this bond open for a while, give us some options for using the accumulating TIF revenue on other projects, like Curry Pike?
That is a great question. And part of it would be up to the developer. So they own the bond and they could draw on it if there was something going on out there. But I do think what you said makes the most sense, to pay this off, and then the RDC could decide if you would keep it open. And we would have to make sure that the authorizing documents allow for the money to be spent on those other projects. So, that would be the discussion there. And I think the developer, we would want to include in those discussions to make sure what their project, are they truly gone as far as they can go or want to go on that, or, what is their plan going forward?
I would say that unlike our the West Side TIF, this TIF would not end with when that bond's paid off, right? So in the West Side TIF, if we pay off the 2015 bond, that kind of, and if all the bonds are paid off, then that TIF district would end. And that's because when it was established and then the rules changed prior to 2015, and then we issued a bond to kind of set the life of that, and that life is set with the same time period as that bond. This one, we could get rid of the bond, and I would say, I know the developer, and this is no way trying to disparage the developer, but in a hypothetical situation, if you closed out the bond, then there would be no ability to get the rest of that $6 million out in terms of projects, and then you could add, I'd have to relook at what's currently in that TIF, but you could certainly add that part of that Curry Pike project, because it's right alongside of it, to the TIF plan for the Curry profile, and then you could use the money for that. I mean, I guess my feeling is that if we're going to get close to paying it off next year, maybe we should look at, the TIF plan and then maybe adding the Curry profile to it to help fund that project.
Is that a boundary extension or just a document extension as far as?
It would just be adding projects to the current, geographically it's surrounded by the West Side TIF, so I don't think you could expand the boundaries of it, but it would be adding projects to the list.
Yeah.
Essentially, that would have an overlapping ability to pay from two particular TIFs if necessary?
I think for the most part, a lot of the Curry Pike you can say is physically connected or serves that property, and so that's kind of the benchmark. I think if you get south of 3rd Street, that may become more of an issue, or north. There's geographics where it becomes harder to make that discussion, but I think at least for that part that's close to that, I think it's easily said to be connected to that project.
That's discussions needs to be had with the developer accordingly to how, once we pay it off. Year and a half from paying off.
I think I think we can have it with the developer, but I think once the bond's paid off, you don't have to, right? I mean, given that they're the sole property owner for this TIF district, it makes a lot of sense to keep them in the loop and make sure that they're comfortable with what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you shouldn't, I'm just saying it's not necessarily a requirement, it's a good idea.
That good. Something of that nature, if we look at it in the next 2 to 5 years, does that assist the highway department in their budgeting for that?
That's basically, we broke it into 3 segments to be able to afford it, not put so much strain. Allocated, it definitely helps everybody.
Yeah, because they're also alongside it and a beneficiary of, in a way, of those improvements, right? Even though they're included in it, I mean, it's twofold, I guess, right? They're part of it, and they'll be a beneficiary of the improvements. Yeah.
At this present moment, moving forward on that, we know based on the financial analysis here, we're around a year and a half to get it paid off. But that gives time to have discussions with the developer and then add projects in if need be so we can move forward and allocate.
Right. Yeah.
And our highway department can determine if there's anything else that would serve this property as well. That I can't think of any, but you never know.
And we don't have to worry about sunsetting if it's paid.
Correct.
Okay, we still.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions on Curry profile?
Oh, yeah, one quick question on that. When we say they've only drawn about 103,000 on that, that's just the amount that we have, that once we pay back the 103, that bond is closed.
Well, we in discussions with the property owner, that is their desire, is to get that paid off and then close out that bond. That is what they have requested from us.
Okay.
And that $103 or $103,000 essentially was the closing cost of the bond itself. So none of that, or if any of that, it was very little went into actual projects. And they did do quite a bit of work on the site.
Well, I mean, look at the assessed value increase. Yeah. Yeah.
Increase shows that.
Okay.
All right,
Moving
that
on.
sounds good. Let's move on to Fullerton Pike. Same kind of thing. You guys are familiar with our reports. There's a lot of information here. I won't go through every page of that. This situation with our tax rate, I do want to point that out, that the tax rate has been declining for the last several years. And also point out that this particular area is in the Monroe County School District. They've got 2 referendum tax rates that are included in the total, but we do not get to capture those. So very steady decrease in tax rate, which impacts our TIF revenue. The second page here is our cash that we've got at the county level. It's Fund 4922. We've had a pretty consistent cash balance year to year. On this one, at the end of 24, we had just over $566,000 of TIF revenue in there. We don't produce a lot of TIF out there right now. It's been pretty steady at about 150,000, but we do have a large bridge project going on that we've funded some from our TIF, but it's also, the bulk of the funding has come from the county major bridge fund, and then the county did a bond issue to pay for the remainder that we couldn't pay from cash. So we would expect this $566,000 plus whatever TIF revenue we bring in this year to go towards completing that big bridge project. Here's our assessed value that we've captured. Like I said, it's been pretty consistent, and you can see that tax rate going down. And when we remove those referendum rates, it's really a very low tax rate that we capture out there. So with that, I'll wrap Fullerton Pike up and ask for any questions on that area.
Okay. When I look at the analysis of cash and investments, I look at the amount that's TIF settlement, that row across, and I look at the historical assessed value and annual tax increment, how come the TIF numbers don't match up? Sometimes they're close.
Yeah, and
For
that's a great
example-
question. We get some things, we get some reimbursements back sometimes. And I think in that line, you can see for 24, we've got 16,000 of reimbursements in there. And I think we probably need to review 2023 and see if we didn't have something put into the wrong fund at the county level that we got fixed in 2024. So we need to pull the detail out, because you're right that 23 to 24 doesn't look normal on the
Well,
TIF revenue.
And I'm wondering if, because 24 is considerably higher, whether we ended up with part of the 23 tax actually being deposited in the 24 calendar year.
Yep, that's definitely what it looks like. And we'll look at that and make an amendment to this page as needed to try to clarify that better.
Okay. All right, yep. That was my big question there. Where is my list of? I don't think this map is correct. Map is showing property north of Fullerton Pike is in this TIF, and I didn't think this TIF had any property north of Fullerton Pike.
I think the answer to that is when it was initially conceived, it did, and then the city annexed the properties that are north of Fullerton Pike.
Right.
So they're kind of in a limbo area where they are.
Low area?
Where we can't collect from them. I'll have to check the statute whether that removes them from the TIF or not. And if it does, we'll amend the map. But that is, those areas I know have been annexed.
Yes, that's what I thought. They've been annexed.
Is that the Bill C. Brown property? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Just to clarify that, we're not collecting revenues from that particular parcel at the present moment. We're going to have to check. Could be.
No, we shouldn't be.
Okay.
The question is whether, just because you're not, whether that means it's totally removed from the TIF area, in which case we could remove it from our map, or whether by some reason it's still in that TIF area.
In the TIF, but it's no good to us.
Non-revenue producing.
My assumption is that it gets removed and that we should take that off the map.
Okay.
Now, is that the parcel under the Bill C. Brown trustee? Okay. So we're showing it, right, payable, but it should not reflect next year, right? Is that, help me out
That
here.
property was annexed years ago.
Okay, okay.
So it's just a matter of when we update, we need to update the map, assuming that it is excluded, and I'll confirm that. We just need to
Well,
update that.
That's
Okay.
because we've got some parcels in our real estate name that are, say, Bill C. Brown. And so the value of those is actually included in our assessed value.
But I think he does own some south of 46 as well, or of Fullerton Pike as well. So I think some of this area he owns.
It must be the smaller properties given the kind of relatively small number. That's right, because they discussed putting the jail on that site one time. Yeah, that's right, that's right.
I just think this ought to get cleared up, because we have what, 2, 4, 6, 8. There are 12 properties listed, but if I count the number of parcels that are below Fullerton Pike, I don't get that many.
You've looked at the two coincide.
Okay, which is exactly what their report says we ought to do.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we'll work with Jeff and the auditor's office to make sure we get the parcel list updated and the map updated so that we reflect the current situation.
okay, that's 2 down. You want to do, which one next?
One question on
Steve.
Fullerton, just to make sure. The revenue that's going in, that'll go to the bridge project, and that will be funded completely by the end of this year, or will we have additional revenues that'll be having to be paid out in the future out of this?
We will use, and Lisa can talk about the project, but we will use revenue to pay some portion of the debt service on the bonds the county issued for the project. So there will be a commitment for future TIF revenue to some extent, not for the full payment on the bonds, but to help satisfy those debt service payments annually.
And I would, the bond documents indicate that we would make sure that at least 50% of the TIF revenue is available for payment of those expenses.
We did a resolution to that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think,
And,
Is that
Yeah.
50% of each year?
yeah,
yes.
yeah, at least 50%, but the resolution that allows that means you could actually pay more if necessary, or if the revenue increased. And that
Yes.
way, that would retire that cost and free up additional revenue in the future.
And I would just say that the TIF's portion of that bond payment is minuscule compared to what, I mean,
The size of the bond.
you know, it's a pretty expensive bridge.
We're being helpful, but in a minor way.
Everything helps.
Everything
Every little
else.
bit helps, yes.
Yeah.
So I don't think you could end it early, even if we gave 100%, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
All right, State Road 46. And we'll go through this kind of the same way. This is very similar to Curry Profile, where we authorized a $4.5 million bond, but the developer has only drawn, in this case, $61,500. So again, there's an idea, there's a project out there. The county wanted to assist the developer with that. We've done so, and since that time we've been in a holding pattern. So we're ready to go. There's also a large project out there. We've built, and we're paying 4% on that, so $1,230 is interest every 6 months that we pay on the bonds. Our cash balance at the county level, we've continued to grow that. So we're up to almost 1.8 million at the end of 2024. And that's to help pay for that big project that Lisa has been planning out there.
Well, and maybe to add a
and
little
we're
more, maybe add a little more context to that. We had a conversation with Steve Kreider today, who is the developer. They're still planning on doing the roadway this year. They are waiting for, and they've been waiting for like 9 to 10 months on a,
It's called a Lomar permit, land of map revision.
so he still anticipates getting that road with Hunter Valley completed this year.
Okay.
Cannot move forward until he
The
has,
permit is a long process. It's new in the last couple of years. For Fullerton Pike Phase 3, it took probably over a year to get that permit through IDEM.
All right, so here is my question. This says we've got $1,784,000 in the bank. And if I look at estimated annual tax increment for this year through 2029, add it to that 1.7 million, I end up with roughly $3,500,000. So how do we end up paying back $4.5 million if we've only got $3.5 million to work with? Do that.
So if we do put that money in, or the developer puts that money in for the road, the assumption is that new assessed value, new development will occur, and that will increase the TIF revenue. So we have not made any projections at this point in time on what those increases in assessed value might be, just because we're not sure what the developer's plan was or how soon that might happen, because it'll take some time to get the road done, and then it'll take even more time to get buildings built, and then more time to get them assessed and finally pay tax on the new building. So it is a long cycle to increase those TIF revenues. So that's the key, and that the bonds, if I go back to that schedule, the bonds are outstanding, let's see, all the way to 2033. So that was the original. We would have to go back, and maybe that's a discussion with the developer when we look at their build out, that may not be enough time to pay the bonds back. And I think, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that is the end date on the area as of now.
Yeah, I think that's how we structured it, and I guess
Yeah.
my response would be twofold. One is the end of this TIF is not in 2029, but my other would be, that was the deal going into it, is that we would use the TIF we had available to make payments, and if we could not make the payments, then the developer was on the hook for any extra payments necessary. So
What's the motivation for Steve to actually do this project if he's going to get stuck for $1 million bill?
one, I think he's required to under the PUD that's in the area. So this road is a required build for him under that. So even if he got reimbursed, 3 out of the 4 million, he's still got 3 more million than he would if he didn't do it. And the second is, I think there's ample time for there to be development that would push us from 3 million to 4.5. When did you say the bond ended? I'm sorry.
2033.
February of 33. Sorry.
So
Yeah.
take another 3 years on this, then you're up another million, so you're at 4. And so that $500,000 difference is where you're really at. Because I think the repayment schedule goes until.
But I'm trying to think, so we put a jail on the new road we're building, right? But since that's a municipal thing, it doesn't give us any money, right? And the question is, where else? He's been doing building on the south side. We got a new one coming online soon for PA, right? But he has shown really no interest in developing anything on the north side up there. And I'm trying to figure out how we provide sufficient incentive for them to actually do something there, which would give us a considerable increase in assessed value, particularly since this is going to end in 33, and that would effectively give us 9 years of TIF money, which is not very much for a big bond that would put in a lot of roads, for example, or a sewer system in that big open area part that he's got. So I'm having trouble figuring out how this becomes a viable thing for him to really put his teeth into.
And I'm not, Steve, I'm not him, so I can't answer it, but I think I would say that the roadway that's there currently has a sewer underneath it
Yes.
from the plant. And so, you know, a lot of that infrastructure's there. He has a lot of sunk costs into this area already because this is the second time we've done a bond with him, and the first one we couldn't. He's currently going through amending the PUD to make it more amenable to develop. And so I think there's a lot of other factors going on in there. I also think that developing the land with or without now or in the future is always going to be his best, is going to be in his interest that's available to him.
Is the amount of TIF money we can put into the development of that area, and I see us just losing opportunities as we go on here, just as we have in the past, and that's.
There's no way to incentivize accordingly because he's already bought the bonds and we're required to make the payments accordingly. We just may not be able to, and it's at Steve's jeopardy in regards to if it's unable, then it's responsibility to take care of.
We've done everything, well, pretty much everything we can.
So the revenues that this TIF would typically have that would have had, you know, I think Logan Land Development in there, what kind of revenues are being lost in this now that we're under municipal ownership?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't think it's undeveloped, so it wouldn't be at a huge assessed value.
Yeah.
There will be a decrease in our overall revenues that have been produced over the past periods.
Oh, yeah, especially given the price, which is now, you know, that's it. That's the value of the land, the 11 million.
Period.
Yeah. Without improvements.
VA that's going in, is that going to be into a non-taxable situation, or is that a taxable property itself?
My understanding, I got this information from talking to one of the people who were also bidding on the project, and according to him, and I can't remember if it's him, kind of requires it to be taxable, right? So I understand, and I think it would.
Private owner leasing it to the VA. Okay.
Is that true? Is that actually true? I didn't know that. The private owner is leasing it back to the VA.
That is my, to the best of my knowledge, yes.
Kind of like Payne Enterprises leased it back to Ivy Tech, and now Ivy Tech owns it. The nursing training facility.
Or the license branch building further on Curry, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah,
more like privately held.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think so.
The question we're trying to try to identify is a matter of, as we look in 2 years down the road from a assessed value situation, we're trying to capture in the TIF prior to the sunsetting, that we have those revenues, and will it be a non-taxable situation or not based upon the parcels that we have there? Approximately what, between the park and the new jail site, were 100+ acres.
Right. We're on the hook.
Okay, thank you.
I would just say you're probably at more 60 to 70 developable acres, because a lot of that Quarry Park area is not developable.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the aggregate amount. Yeah, what revenue will we be losing that could have been put in? It's.
I think the increment, Jeff, you got a good point, but I think the increment on the improvements would be considerable if they were commercial properties. I think that's what,
Oh, yes.
yeah, and that's where the question comes in. Okay, how much are we losing out of that? And if we go by the schedule of the jail, then you're looking, what, 4 years, maybe 5. Things happen. That would be kind of, in my mind, questionable in terms of having revenue successfully closing out the bond. So,
Recall, we talked about splitting this TIF district, creating another TIF district, which would be able to extend that TIF district's life beyond?
What we would do, and Charlie, chime in wherever I'm mistaken, but I think we would do the same process we did with the Curry profile, where we would carve it out of one TIF district and then create a new TIF district. And when you do that, it would have the standard, and I think residential TIFs are 20 years maximum. So you'd have a 20-year TIF district for that, right? So, I mean, at this point, and you'd also want to do it for areas that hadn't been developed yet, right? Because once the building's there, you don't get increment on it if it's already existing. So you would look at that, and you could still carve that out and give it the whole new 20-year cycle. I think commercial, you can go up to 25, but residential is a 20-year cycle.
Could we add land that was not, well, I think we broached that before. We could then add property. So that one chunk, which is not included originally, could be added into a residential TIF.
Correct.
At that point. Okay. So that's another.
Yes.
Right. Questions about? Okay, on to the biggie.
All right, biggest for last. We'll go to the west side. And again, I'll kind of skip through this. We have the same situation here. We've had nice decreases in tax rates. We do have a few parcels in this area that the city annexed that we do still get to capture our non-city part of the tax rate. And we get to do that because we had bonds outstanding when the city did that annexation. So we've got that. We've got 2 bonds left, 2020 bonds that go out to 2039, and then we've got some 2015 bonds that also go out to 2039. So at that point, that's when this West Side TIF district will expire on those final payment dates for each of those bonds. Here's our combined debt service in 2025. We're paying about almost $700,000 between the 2 bonds, almost $2.4 million of TIF revenue. So excellent coverage, debt service coverage. These bonds are backed by the county so that if there were to be a deficiency in the TIF revenue and we didn't have any other revenue to use for debt service, we would levy a property tax to make up the difference. So we want to make sure we have cash to make our bond payments. We've got a lot of historical information here. We have debt service reserves for both bond issues that are held by Old National Bank. They're the trustee for the bonds. So I've got some details there. And then we've got the big county level TIF fund, just like we looked at the first 3. And historically, we've had a good cash balance here. When we get to 2024, we really, because we've got some large projects that we've been working on out there, that balance went down to $347,000 at the end of 24, and we've spent some money primarily for the lease payment on the new fire truck. That's dropped that balance down in 25 to 83,000, and we're really in a holding pattern there on spending until we get our June settlement of TIF revenue. And then probably the other page to focus on is the cash flow page. It's on page 26, and this has gotten to be very critical now because the cash balance has dipped down. So we've got a 25 column here with our cash balance. We've got our estimated TIF revenue. We're going to get some federal funding in for part of the project we're finishing. Then we've got our expenses, our 2 bond payments, our STEM payment, fire truck lease, and then the projects that Lisa's working on. And I think that the discussion we had after we sent this draft report out, and I think Lisa referenced this earlier, would be we would move back the starting point for Curry Pike, not started in 25, move that back to 26, so that we can make sure we've got a comfortable cash balance at the end of 25. So if we take that 650 out, we should be over $1 million of cash balance at the end of 25, which would be much better in the overall scheme of things, because you don't know what expenses might come up, or a big taxpayer doesn't make their property tax payment and we have a delay in TIF revenue. So we're glad that Lisa has been able to accommodate that. So those are the highlights, I think, on West Side. So any questions on those items?
What I'm hearing is we're trying to build back up our reserves in order to make sure that we have the debt service coverage that's necessary in order to meet the financial requirements of the bond.
Yeah, and that's right. We have a fully funded debt service reserve for each one of those that are. I don't show those in the county fund balance, so we do have an additional 1 year of debt, and we would not ever want to hit that reserve, but we have that there. And the way the bond documents are set up is when we bring our TIF revenue in, the first set aside goes to those bond payments. So realistically, I think if we had a problem, we would probably be back to Lisa and say, what else, is there anything else we can delay or not do if we came down to that. But by moving Curry Pike back, at least that helps us bring back the cash balance, just so we have a little more cushion if there is something that happens. I think the biggest thing would be if a big taxpayer delayed their payment, or we've seen that happen where they a lot of these big companies have tax departments somewhere else in the U.S., and so they mail their payment and we don't get it for 30 days late or something like that. So it's more of a timing delay than anything.
Any way it goes, we're not in any jeopardy by the balance being down to where it is.
Correct.
Because of our reserve situation that's sitting there. Okay.
Correct. That's a good point. Yes.
And I would say that that's not to be comfortable with where we're at.
No, it's just,
Right, for the
we've got the
meantime.
backstop, so if someone fails to follow through in the timely manner, we're still okay,
Yep.
for now.
Yeah.
Lisa can pull another rabbit out of the hat.
Yeah.
About that.
And I guess not to be too doom and gloom, but our agreements with Ellettsville for the fire truck and for the STEM payments all have provisions in it that says if we are unable to meet our bond payments and the bond payments have priority. So
Yes.
Yeah.
we want to avoid exercising those clauses.
And our complete backstop is an additional property tax levy.
Correct.
Okay. I just.
So we're moving the 650,000 to 26, 750,000 to 27, which by then will be considerably more. Problem with delaying is it costs more.
It is. But that also helps us, that Curry Pike has drainage structures, has sidewalks, it has curbs, it has a lot of infrastructure that needs replaced. Gives us time to develop a good project and helps get the cash back. We eliminated that. We worked with the railroad, and the price on that was extreme. And we also, I want to throw out there, if there is an emergency or anything, I still have funds that I'm holding back in the local road and street. Still have that as a backup, so.
Other projects to get, the ones we got going get completed, then there will always be a little extra cost.
Correct. Right now, knock on wood, we do not have any change orders for the Vernal Pike. Intermediate completion date is July. And Liberty Drive Trail, we're getting ready to do the punch list and walk through for that. And that would have impact on the TIF.
Lisa, do you have a sense of where we are cost-wise on material, let's say, at the railroad crossing at Vernal, the new one, and what's coming up with Curry? You know, obviously you don't have numbers, but do you have a rough estimate from what you see on price of material and labor?
We usually get, our benefit around here is we have two pay. So we get good prices because they're competitive against each other. Not everybody has that luxury. So what we usually estimate comes out really close to what the price that a lot of work. I'm anxious to see how it comes out. But again, the last few years, right on, and the price that we get for hiring out some of our paving and everything, super beneficial to Monroe County because $5 a ton if we did it in-house. And that's saving our equipment, that's saving our labor to keep other projects going as mowing, tree trimming, everything else outside of paving, because when we pave, it's everyone paves. Everything else stops. But being able to be that close to what the FOB price is and hiring it out, you can't beat it. It's very, like I said, we have two great paving contractors that provide good quotes and bids and keep us intact with our budget.
Good, that's great. Okay.
Okay, do we have anything else for Charlie?
I guess the question I always ask FSG at this point is, after reviewing all four of the TIF districts and looking through the reports, do you see, what would your recommendation be for the, kind of June decision of the RDC as to whether there is any excess assessed value in any of the TIF districts?
We believe there is no excess assessed value. We've got the cash committed and the revenues for this year and then beyond. The West Side's a good example. We need every dollar we can get. We've got plenty of projects we need to do.
I understand it, this report has to go to the state. Is that correct? We have to turn these in?
We give it to the county council, and then the county council auditor puts it in the state system.
Could we amend the West Side page 26 to move the funds for the Curry Pike construction to the right by 1 year?
Yes, we can definitely do that. And then I've got a couple of other corrections that we talked about. earlier. So we'll get a revised set of reports down to Jeff this week still, because we'd like to get those to the county council for their April meeting. So.
Okay. Else? Last minute? None. Well, Charlie, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks.
Could you guys give a motion that to submit these as after the amendments to the county council?
I will move that we submit these reports as amended to the county council at its April meeting.
Second.
Want me to call the roll?
Yep. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarty?
Yes.
Commissioner Cassidy? Yes. Motion is approved, 3-0.
Okay. Next item on the agenda are the minutes for our February 19th meeting. Did them in the packet of information. Corrections or additions?
Motion to approve is presented.
Do you have a second?
Second, I watched on Cats since I wasn't here.
Jeff, would you call the roll?
I will, but I will just note that Lisa Rich actually prepared these because I was at the late.
That's why they're perfect.
That's why they look so good.
Good. You want to do the ones for this month too?
I was just looking at his scribbles. I can't do that.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarty?
Yes.
Commissioner Cassidy?
Yes.
Motion is approved, 3-0, and I will include that the future minutes should always be done by the Highway Department in next month's minutes.
Just add that to our list.
Okay, claims. We have two claims this month. One from Terracon Consultants for $868.95. And the other one is our RBB CSC STEM payment for the fall of 2024 of $123,850.61 for a total of $124. We're a little bit late on getting the RBB one done because we had to go back and adjust it for the spring payment that had been made and some finagling we had to do to get our money squared away last fall. This is now correct.
And I would just note that this is actually being paid out of the general fund through one of the auditor's office's lines, and then we're having you approve it for when settlement comes in. We'll do a correction to put it into the 4920 West Side TIF fund.
That will clean up the balance in all funds.
Correct.
To a correct point.
About the Terracon, it just looked like this was inspection for,
It is. It's for the MSE wall that was constructed for the Vernal Pike.
do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Second for approval of the claims of Terracon Consultants for $868.90. SC STEM payment for the fall of 2024 of $124,719.56. Jeff?
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarty?
Yes.
Commissioner Cassidy?
Yes.
Motion is approved, 3-0.
Okay, do we have any staff comments? Lisa?
I don't. I'm happy to answer any questions. Construction kind of slows down in the winter. April 1st is the contractor's date that their the clock.
Good. I'm ready to, I was driving through there the other day and I recalled, hey, we were here a few years ago and we had a opening of that part of the Profile Parkway.
Yep.
And at the time I commented, I wanted to get back to open up the bridge across the track.
Will.
I am ready. I think it'll also make repair work on Curry Pike much easier to do. Jeff, anything else?
No, I was just, I think I already expressed that we met with Mr. Kreider about Hunter Valley Road, and so we're eagerly awaiting for that project to be started and completed.
Do you have any more information about this jail thing happening, not happening? Any kind of timeline idea?
Well, the timeline that I've seen has it opening in, I think, mid-2029. I think the next, I don't have the timeline off the top of my head, but I certainly could email it to you, the timeline that's been shared with the council and commissioners on steps of when do we expect the next LZ. I think there are at least 2 more before they start bid documents. They are currently working with departments, and I mean, I think the budget needs to be, the project needs to fit the budget, and right now it's a little bit over. So I think that's something that needs to be worked out. But I can get you the timeline. I think 2029 is when it's anticipated to be done.
It's more than a jail, it's justice complex.
It is a justice center, yes.
That's what I thought. I want to make sure I got that terminology right, because there's more than just a jail, correct?
It's going to have the courts and all the court-related functions, which would include the jail.
Okay, I didn't think the parameters had changed. I got nervous.
No, the parameters have not changed.
And clerk, right? Clerk moving?
It's clerk, the clerk of the courts, probation, public defender, prosecutor. Yes. And I'm sure I'm missing some, but
Essentially, anything that's in the Justice Building, which has, what, a couple hundred employees?
I would say anything in the Justice Building in that block, as well as most of the Community Corrections Building. And I think I do have some justice staff in Showers Building. 200 is low. I would say just the Sheriff's Department. Sheriff's Department by itself is probably closer to 150. And then the others, I would say a total of probably 350 to 400 employees would be my guess.
Little Sheriff's Department is planned to be out there also.
Correct.
Okay.
But we just call it the Law and Order Complex.
There will be, just clarify from a time frame standpoint, you'll email it accordingly, but completion in 2029 for everything, jail will be prior to that. Or
I
I don't know, with Randy, I'm confused now.
the whole thing is supposed to be done in 2029, right? The justice, I mean, it's all one building, right? At this point, with the design, it's all one building. So the whole thing is supposed to be open in 2029. Whether they get the jail done early or not, I don't know which one. I think it's anticipated that the jail will take a little bit longer to actually construct than the rest of it. But I don't know. I'm not a scheduler of construction, so I'm not going to venture a guess on how they will manage that.
2029 is what we, okay.
And I just assume I said the end of 2029.
Commissioners' comments. Tucker, did you have anything?
Comment, thanks.
Yeah, just to latch onto that, I've heard talk about possible commercial development in that area that would support all those jobs. And that came from one of the commissioners offline and at an event that this is a possibility, or it's being discussed. I don't know, which would help a little bit, with what we discussed earlier in that district. Hope to see it because, yeah, you're basically moving a lot of the county seat into a new area. A lot of jobs, a lot of people in that area. So interesting to see how it turns out. The road extension, I guess, when I think about it, just to clarify, we're still waiting for the permit for that? And then
It's a new permit.
it's a new permit, right, but he still expects to have it complete by year end. Is that?
That's pretty much what he said today,
Okay.
because he stated that he had applied for the permit. It's been at least 9 months, so the problem with that permit is anytime it comes back to, say, a contractor or an engineering firm, they make review of it, they make comments, they get back with IDEM. IDEM, in their process, their clock starts back at 0. They're allotted another 60 or 90 days to get it back to that. So it's a back and forth, and that's what seems to take the full year to get this permit. Steve said he applied for it like 9 months ago, so, and we offered to, I'm happy to reach out to my contact at IDEM that I worked with the Fullerton Pike, and maybe he could see where it's at and what stage it's at. But it's holding up a lot of permits. I have some federal aid projects that's going through the same process.
Okay.
And it has to do with the floodplain, basically, and the rise that you do in a floodplain. So the way I understand it is if your build is going to change the rise at all within that floodplain, and that would cause a map revision, that has to go through this process.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Andy, anything?
Circle back around on our residential TIF, just so I can identify as we keep talking about them. What is the procedural aspect that we would have to go through to actually make one? Is it the legal aspect through the commissioners, bring it through to redevelopment? Because, we've talked about it, but I'm trying to get my head around, and just for the public as a whole, how that functionality would actually work. Where would we start, and how would that progress?
Well, I guess the start would be to develop a plan, right? And then the plan would come to the Redevelopment Commission, and the redevelopment would preliminarily approve that plan. And then it would need to be, it would go to the county commissioners and the county plan commission. The plan commission reviews it to determine whether it fits with the county planning documents. The commissioners review it for a kind of a broader scope of whether it's a good idea, but could also certainly include the interpretation of the planning ordinance. And then it would come back to the Redevelopment Commission for a public hearing. And then at that public hearing, you have or from the public, you would then make a decision whether to move forward or not. So that's kind of the process. I think we've done it in 2 to 3 months before, but I think we had probably a pretty developed plan at that point. The meetings themselves take about 2 to 3 months because of all the bodies that have to look at it.
Starting point of it is a private developer bringing something to us? What body would start that process? Because
this body could start that.
do it.
Yeah, this body could say, here's the map, here's what we want to do, here we want to, and depending on how detailed you want it to be, we want to include roads here, here, and here, or we just want to do this initial road and we'll amend the plan later to include these others. The more details, the better, of course, because then it gives the commissioners and the plan commission more information on their decision process, but it would start here, whether a developer brings it to you or this group on its own does it. I don't think we've ever had, well, I'm pretty sure the Fulton Pike TIF did not start with a developer. The West Side TIF did not start with a developer. North Park might have, or not North Park, State Road 46 corridor might have. Curry Profile started with a developer.
That's where starting is we pick the area, an area that needs redeveloped, essentially, and it would start at this point. So I'm just trying to identify as we talk about this.
There has to be some expectation that its development is actually possible going forward in the time frame of the TIF that we would be creating.
20-year timeframe.
Right.
Well, and I wish Charlie was still on here, but I think there are options, and I would defer to the people who set up these TIFs much more regularly than I do, where the clock doesn't start ticking until a bond is issued. And I'm guessing there's probably a time period there where you have to do it in or it starts clipping. Typically, that's like with a bond anticipation note, they can only go up to 5 years. So I mean, I guess my gut reaction is that you probably would have 5 years to get somebody to start working. And then once you issued that bond, that's when the district would actually form. But
we've got clarification that a multifamily project actually can pay into a residential TIF? So that.
And I think commercial as well.
Commercial and?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that itself would increase the increment amount that we could collect if a residential TIF was established. Okay.
Seems like that's about the only way you could get that done, is if you have a PUD
Yeah, I
type
think
environment where,
it's got to be all of it.
yeah, it's got to be all of it, and make it worthwhile.
Well, and the other thing that it can do, you can actually buy land. TIF money to bond, to buy land.
And I think any TIF district, you're allowed to buy land or buildings and things like that. Like the body bought the nursing school building, ironically called the Payne Building at the time, and bought that as the Redevelopment Commission. And then we worked with Ivy Tech to get it to.
Well, yeah, French Lick has done that. They've done a lot of real estate.
Yeah, I signed the deed, and it's now the Lee Marsh. Oddly enough, fitting thing to have finally gotten accomplished.
Like on those TIFs, though, if it's a mixed-use area, you could cut out the residential side and not TIF that, but just TIF the commercial part of it, correct?
You could.
That's kind of what you and I had talked about. So my understanding is commercial could be in there, but then the residential would go back to the schools.
I think you could do that. I guess my reaction, it depends what you want to do with
Right.
the increment, right?
Open
If you
up
want
a
to, have
Pandora's
a lot
box,
of maybe much more, down payment assistance, those types of programs, you'd really want it all in the same TIF district. If it's infrastructure, I would be curious with that idea, what would happen if you TIF'd the whole thing, but you said all the residential was the excess assessed value, and you did all your payments based upon the commercial area, so that it would still be in the TIF districts, you could expend money on that, but the property tax would not go to the TIF district. That is probably a little complicated for people who haven't dealt with TIFs for a long time.
But as Richard mentioned, though, prior to that law slipping in at the bottom of another law a year ago, the residential TIF was set up for economically underdeveloped areas, correct? to try to promote residential growth. That was the way the law read.
It had to do, the previous law had to do with the number of homes built in the township, single-family residents built in the township for average over the previous 3 years. I don't think it really, which may be a correlation with economically depressed, probably is, but it didn't say that on the face. The issue, and until the legislature clarified it, was how do you pay for the cost of a TIF district if you only have single-family homes, right? That was always the big, because they've got a long lead time before it's built out, and the assessed value is a lot lower than a multifamily, and a 1% cap on your property taxes is a lot different than a 2% or a 3%.
Worked hard to give us a residential TIF and then took all the ability to actually make it work away.
Where we start and where we end, and if
But it starts here and it ends here.
then no pressure.
All we can do is help a little.
And for instance, the West Side TIF, that developer was GE, right? I'm not sure developer is the right word, but that business, when the West Side TIF started, they were redoing all their manufacturing equipment, and I think maybe even doing some expansion. So that was the cash flow that started the whole West Side TIF, is that.
Did learn today that that subdivision of the point has started to see development now. It's been there for 15 years, and it's
Actually, Friday morning, Tony.
well, they're
Tony
putting
Fox.
they're putting in the side path along Swartz
Yep,
Ridge right now.
Tony Fox took that over. Yeah, we're happy.
The sewer district. like
True.
those hook-on fees.
Forgot about that.
The point, right, the point,
Across from the point.
across from the point, along Strain
It was
Ridge.
called Freeman's Field.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Housing, with the ARPA money, we looked at that site for affordable housing. It was just too far away from transportation and other kinds of infrastructure to make it make sense for affordable housing.
Oh, yeah, it's far away. Yeah.
Okay, with that, I think we will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.